Why did he laugh when she handed him the report? Why did a decorated officer, a man twice her size, with decades in uniform, find amusement in the words that had cost her blood and nearly her life? The bloodstains still clung faintly to her uniform, hidden beneath pressed fabric, but Emma Reese could feel them. They hadn't washed out, not from her skin, not from her memory. 48 hours earlier, she had crawled through dust and fire in the Coringal Valley. Now, she stood stiff and silent in Major Hayes's office, listening to him pick apart her report like it was a bad joke. Exhaustion, heat stroke. His voice dripped with mockery, each syllable as sharp as broken glass. That's why your platoon failed. That's your explanation. Emma's gaze fixed on the wall above his head, unblinking. Sir, as stated in my report, extreme environmental conditions compromised. He cut her off with a laugh, loud, jarring. Environmental conditions. Is that what they're calling cowardice these days? Her jaw tightened, her throat burned. The room seemed to shrink, air thick with his disdain. He circled her like a wolf, reminding her of the imbalance, his height, his rank, his certainty that he was right. You're the first female combat officer in my battalion, Hayes continued. And I warned Colonel Richards this would happen. No fortitude, no resilience, and here we are, a perfect example. Emma's chest rose and fell in silence. The images came without warning, the blast, the fire, Rodriguez screaming for his leg, Spencer buried under concrete, Davis bleeding into her shoulder as she shielded him. She had written none of it. Instead, she had written the version Hayes wanted, the failure of her body, not the truth of her sacrifice. Sir, with all due respect, she managed, voice calm, steady, rehearsed. You don't get to speak of respect, he snapped. He slammed the report down on the desk, paper rattling like gunfire. 12 men at risk because of your weakness. You'll face a formal review. Until then, you're confined to administrative duties. Dismissed with a flick of his wrist, she turned and walked out. Every step cost her. Her body still remembered the burns along her arms, the cracked ribs wrapped too tightly under her uniform, the lacerations carved into her back. She had carried those men. She had shielded them. And now she carried something heavier, the silence. The battalion headquarters buzzed with life outside, soldiers moving with purpose, orders shouted, boots striking pavement. But the hum changed when she passed. Eyes followed her, some pitying, some cold, others curious. Word had spread fast. Lieutenant Reese had cracked. Emma. Captain Sarah Mitchell caught up, falling into step beside her. Intelligence officer, one of the few other women in the regiment. I heard about Hayes, Mitchell said quietly. Don't let him get to you. He's a dinosaur. Emma let out something close to a laugh, but it was hollow. Too late for that. Mitchell studied her face, sharp eyes searching. Something happened out there, something you didn't put in the report. Emma froze by the window. Outside, under the Georgia sun, soldiers ran drills, sweat pouring, but her vision blurred, shifting. Dust storms, gunfire, the weight of Rodriguez, his blood soaking her back. Her lungs screamed again as if she were still in that valley. I followed protocol, she said, voice flat. That's all that matters. Mitchell frowned. Emma, you've been back 2 days and you look like you haven't slept in a month. Talk to someone, tell the truth. Emma shook her head. And say what? That Hayes is right, that I wasn't strong enough, she swallowed. No, I'll be fine. But she was. Lieutenant Reese. Another voice, deep, commanding. She turned to see Command Sergeant Major Ortiz, a man with 3 decades of war etched into his posture. He didn't waste time. Walk with me. They stepped outside, the humid air pressing like another uniform. Beneath a sprawling oak, Ortiz finally spoke. I read your report, he said, and I read the medic's statement and your sergeant's. His eyes, weathered and sharp, fixed on her. They don't match yours. Emma's pulse quickened. They mentioned details you left out, like sniper fire you drew away from your men, like the 8 clicks you carried Rodriguez after the IED blew his leg off, like dragging them out of fire until your body broke. Why hide that? Emma stared at her hands. They were still bruised. I was just doing my job. That's not how they tell it. Ortiz leaned forward, voice low. So why file a report that makes you look like you had a breakdown? Emma met his gaze. For once, she spoke the truth. Because Hayes would twist it. If I said I carried Rodriguez, he'd call me too weak to lead. If I said I drew sniper fire, he'd say it was my mistake in the first place. There's no version where he sees me as equal. Better me than every other woman who will come after me. Ortiz studied her. For a long moment, silence hung heavy. Then he nodded once. Your physicals tomorrow, don't skip it. That's an order. Her body would betray her then. Every scar, every cracked rib, every burn, all recorded. The truth written not in words but in wounds. That night, Emma stood in front of her bathroom mirror. Slowly, she undid her uniform buttons. Each one felt heavier than the last, like opening a secret she had no right to keep. She stripped down to her underwear, and the reflection stared back. Bruises like dark galaxies across her ribs, burns still pink and glossy on her arms, the jagged scar running down her shoulder where shrapnel had nearly torn her apart. Her body was a map of the valley, of every choice she had made. Her phone buzzed. Her mother's name lit the screen. Emma didn't answer. What could she say? Her mother had been proud of the West Point graduate, the officer, the daughter who had broken barriers. How could she explain that the institution she had fought to join was tearing her apart from the inside? She let the phone ring. Her silence felt safer. When sleep came, it was fractured. Nightmares dragged her back to the valley. Running, always running. Invisible hands pulling her down, Rodriguez screaming on her back, the heat of the Humvee's flames searing her skin again. She woke gasping, throat raw, lungs burning as if she'd never escaped. Morning arrived cruel and sterile. The medical center smelled of antiseptic and judgment. She sat in the paper gown, legs trembling despite her rigid posture. Lieutenant Reese. Dr. Carolyn Winters entered, silver streaks in her hair, eyes practiced at seeing what soldiers tried to hide. I'll be conducting your post-deployment exam. Emma nodded, bracing herself. Remove the gown, Winters said. The fabric slipped. The doctor's sharp intake of breath filled the room. These injuries, her professional tone faltered. None of this was documented. I declined full records, Emma admitted. I got treated, that's all that mattered. That's against protocol. These burns, these ribs, you should have been evacuated. My men needed me, Emma said softly. Dr. Winters's eyes softened. And now they need you to tell the truth. One by one, she examined each wound. Each note was a confession Emma had tried to bury. 17 distinct injuries. Each one proof she had gone beyond the limits, not to fail but to save. The medical record doesn't lie, Lieutenant, Winters said, closing her file. Your body tells a different story than your report, and I'm obligated to submit it. Emma dressed slowly, steady hands despite the storm inside. I understand. But part of her felt lighter, because the lie was ending. That afternoon she was summoned. Colonel Richard's office. Hayes waiting, smug arms folded. Ortiz standing tall, Dr. Winters with her file. Lieutenant Reese, Richard said, we have a problem. Your medical evaluation contradicts your report. Emma stood at attention, eyes forward. Yes, sir. Hayes smirked, grounds for dismissal. Winters stepped forward, her voice firm. Her injuries are consistent with pulling men from fire, carrying weight over long distance, shielding others from debris. In my opinion, they show a soldier who risked everything to save lives. Hayes scoffed, or a soldier too weak for combat. That's enough, Richard snapped. Ortiz cleared his throat. Sir, I brought someone. The door opened. Sergeant Davis walked in, arm in a sling. He saluted. Colonel, he said, voice steady, Lieutenant Reese saved my life, and not just mine. The room stilled, and Emma knew the truth was finally out. Why would a wounded soldier walk into that room? Why risk challenging a major, standing before a colonel, with the weight of truth balanced on his injured arm? Sergeant James Davis didn't flinch. He stood in front of the officers, his sling a reminder of the ambush that had nearly killed him, his salute sharp despite the tremor in his body. "Sergeant," Colonel Richards said, "you were present in the Coringal Valley." "Yes, sir." Davis's eyes cut to Emma, a silent acknowledgement before fixing on the colonel again. "I was there, and I saw what Lieutenant Reese did." Hayes leaned forward, sneering. "Careful, Sergeant. Loyalty is admirable, but lies will end your career." Davis's jaw set. "With respect, sir, these aren't lies. Lieutenant Reese carried Private Rodriguez after the IED severed his leg. 8 clicks, sir, through sniper fire with 3 cracked ribs. She pulled Specialist Taylor from a burning Humvee. She shielded Spencer when the building collapsed. And when shrapnel was flying," he gestured to his own chest, "she covered me, took the hit on her shoulder so I'd live." The words hung heavy. A silence thicker than gunpowder filled the room. Hayes scoffed, louder this time. "Physically impossible. Rodriguez weighs 180 pounds without gear. A woman." "Enough," Richard snapped again, his voice cutting sharp through the air. Emma's hands clenched at her sides. The exposure was unbearable, not the scars, not the wounds, but the barring of her choices. Every sacrifice dragged into light by someone else's voice. She had chosen silence. Davis had chosen to break it. "Why did you file a false report, Lieutenant?" Richard's voice was quieter now, but no less piercing. Emma inhaled, slow, deliberate. Every eye was on her. Hayes's glare, Ortiz's steady watch, Winters's quiet support, Davis's expectation. "I believed," she said, voice level but raw, "that it would be better for the unit and for future female combat officers if my failures were attributed to environmental conditions rather than gender." "So you lied," Hayes pressed, seizing the moment. Emma's eyes flicked to him, sharp. "I omitted details. I feared the truth would be used to set women back. I was willing to carry the blame." Richard studied her, silence stretched. "Then, finally, you were willing to sacrifice your career to protect integration efforts." "Yes, sir." Ortiz stepped forward. "Sir, I've collected statements from the entire platoon, 12 accounts, everyone consistent with Sergeant Davis's testimony." He handed the folder over. Richard skimmed, brows furrowing deeper with each page. "Major Hayes," Richard said, looking up, "did you review these?" Hayes shifted. "I focused on her report, sir, which directly contradicted." "The eyewitness accounts of 12 combat veterans," Richard's tone sharpened. "That didn't strike you as unusual." Hayes's face reddened. "Sir, it's possible they're protecting her." "Or," Ortiz cut in, his voice like gravel, "you saw what you wanted to see, a chance to prove your bias." The tension broke like a fault line under pressure. Richards closed the folder, his decision heavy in his voice. "Lieutenant Reese, your actions demonstrate courage and leadership. Your falsified report cannot be ignored, but neither can the testimony of your men." He paused. "You will submit a corrected report immediately. You will also accept a formal reprimand. But—" Emma braced. "I am recommending you for the Silver Star." The words struck like shockwaves. Emma's head lifted. Hayes froze, disbelief flashing across his face. "Sir," Hayes began. Richard silenced him with a look. "Your sacrifices, physical and professional, uphold the highest traditions of service. That deserves recognition." "Dismissed." As they filed out, Emma found herself face to face with Davis. His eyes met hers, steady, resolute. "You should have told the truth from the start," he said quietly. Emma swallowed. "I didn't want it used against women like you all weren't enough proof." "With respect, ma'am," Davis said, a flicker of a smile breaking through. "You carried Rodriguez with cracked ribs. If that doesn't prove women belong in combat, I don't know what does." The words cut deeper than Hayes's contempt, not because they hurt, but because they healed. That night Emma sat at her small desk, rewriting the report. Each word was harder than combat. For the first time she told it all. The fire, the debris, the burns, the cracked ribs, the weight of another man's life across her shoulders. Every sentence a confession, every detail a scar written into text. A knock on her door broke the silence. Mitchell stood there holding a paper bag. "I brought whiskey," she said. Emma stepped aside. Mitchell poured 2 glasses. "News travels fast. Half the battalion knows you carried Rodriguez with broken ribs, and Hayes got chewed out." Emma winced. "It's exaggerated." Mitchell studied her. "Is it?" They sat in silence, the burn of whiskey filling the spaces words couldn't. Finally, Emma said it. "I thought I was protecting something bigger than myself." Mitchell nodded slowly. "You were, but sometimes the most powerful statement is the truth itself." She lifted her glass, scars and all. Emma clinked hers. For the first time since Afghanistan, the weight felt lighter. The following week she faced the review board, not for dismissal but for recognition. Each of her men testified, one by one. Rodriguez, speaking from Walter Reed on video, voice breaking as he recalled her promise, "You'll see your daughter born." Even the skeptical officers grew silent. Hayes's narrative crumbled under the weight of her scars and her men's words. Afterward, Ortiz walked beside her. "You know," he said, 30 years in uniform taught me the measure of a soldier isn't when things go right. It's when everything falls apart. That's when the truth shows." Emma looked at him. "I just did what anyone would have done." "No, Lieutenant," Ortiz said, his voice firm, almost kind. "You did what a leader does, and you made it harder for the next Hayes to dismiss a soldier because of gender, not merit." As they walked, young lieutenants watched her, eyes curious, hopeful. One, a petite woman with fire in her stare, spoke. "Lieutenant Reese, thank you for showing what's possible." Emma paused, her hand brushed the scar at her shoulder. "The scars are worth it," she said softly. "Remember that." That night Emma finally answered her mother's call. She told her everything. Not the sanitized version, but the full story, the blood, the fire, the fear, the choices. Her mother wept quietly, pride and sorrow braided together. And Emma realized something. The greatest victory wasn't carrying Rodriguez or surviving the ambush. It was claiming her story, without apology, without diminishment. Because sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. What happens when the myth arrives before the person does? What happens when soldiers look at their lieutenant and see not flesh and blood, but a story already larger than life? 6 months after the Coringal Valley, Lieutenant Emma Reese stood on the tarmac at Bagram Airfield. The C-17 touched down in a swirl of Afghan dust, massive engines screaming against the silence of the mountains. The aircraft carried her new platoon, 24 Rangers, battle-hardened faces and untested ones alike. They were hers now, whether they liked it or not. The story had spread, faster than she could contain it. In some versions, she had carried Rodriguez with one arm while firing with the other. In others, she had walked out of the valley untouched, flames at her back, a warrior untouchable. She hated those stories more than Hayes's contempt. Myths erased the truth, that she had cracked ribs, bled into her uniform, whispered lies to a dying man just to keep him alive. Lieutenant Reese, her platoon sergeant, Staff Sergeant Marcus Chun, said, 12 years in uniform, 4 deployments, a man whose word carried more weight than any ribbon. The men are ready for briefing. Emma nodded. Her boots sank into Afghan dust. Then let's not keep them waiting. Inside the briefing tent, 24 men snapped to attention. Their faces told her everything. Curiosity, skepticism, admiration, resentment. A silver star ribbon on her chest preceded her, and not all of them welcomed it. "At ease," she said, stepping forward. Her voice was steady, but her heart pounded. "I know most of you have heard stories about me," she began. "Forget them. Whatever version you heard, let it go. Legends won't keep you alive. Our mission is simple: execute the objective and bring everyone home. That's the only measure of success that matters. A ripple of surprise moved through them. She saw it. They had expected bravado, a rehearsed speech, a myth to match the medal. Instead, she gave them something harder to dismiss: simplicity. Still, eyes lingered, testing, judging, waiting. Afterward, Chun approached. "They're going to push you," he said bluntly. "Not because you're a woman, though some will, but because of the medal. They need to know if you're real or if you got lucky once." Emma met his gaze. "Then we'll show them." The first patrol came 3 days later. Pre-dawn darkness. Helmand Province. Villages where dust swallowed the horizon and silence meant danger. Their mission: gather intelligence on Taliban movements near a remote compound. Emma positioned herself in the middle of the formation, close enough to command. Not so far forward she looked like she had something to prove. 4 hours in, Private Wilson stumbled, the rookie. His ankle twisted badly. Pain etched across his face, but pride kept his words sharp. "I can keep going, ma'am." Emma crouched beside him. His boot was already swelling. Around them the platoon slowed, restless, eyes on her, waiting to see what she'd do. She weighed it: evacuate him, risk mission failure, push him to continue, risk permanent damage or his life. "Can you?" she asked. "Yes." "Should you?" She let the silence linger. "That's another question." Her decision cut through. "Sergeant Chun, redistribute his pack weight. Wilson, you'll use your rifle for support. We'll reassess at the next checkpoint." Neither reckless nor indulgent, just practical. Wilson's relief showed in his eyes, even as he gritted his teeth. Chun gave a small nod, approval, understated but clear. By dusk, they reached the observation point. Hidden in scrub overlooking the valley, they settled into rotations. Hours stretched into silence, broken only by the hum of night insects and the whisper of radios. On the second night, Emma took her watch. Chun joined her, his eyes sharp in the darkness. "The men are talking," he said quietly. Emma smirked. "Should I be worried?" "No, they're impressed, not by the medal, by Wilson." She glanced at him. "You didn't push him to breaking. You didn't send him home either. You treated him like a soldier, not a liability. That's what they notice." Emma lowered her scope. "I'm not here to prove points, just to finish missions without unnecessary casualties." Chun gave a rare smile. "That's why they're coming around. You're not what they expected." "What did they expect?" He hesitated. Then, someone with something to prove, someone dangerous. Emma looked back through the scope. A shadow moved in the valley, headlights flickering. 3 vehicles, Taliban convoy. Their patience paid off. Hours later, they exfiltrated, intelligence secured. No contact, no losses, clean success. Back at Bagram, reports credited the operation with uncovering 3 facilitators. But what mattered more were the looks exchanged within her platoon. Respect, not because of a medal, because she had led without wasting them. 2 weeks later, the test came harder. The platoon was tasked with securing a meeting between local Afghan leaders and coalition officials. A delicate operation, a village caught between Taliban control and fragile government promises. The first hours went smooth. Emma positioned her men carefully, visible presence, hidden overwatch, balance between reassurance and deterrence. Then Chun's voice crackled over radio, calm but urgent. "Lieutenant, movement east. Civilian traffic stopped 20 minutes ago. Feels wrong." Emma's instincts sharpened. She climbed to the rooftop beside him. The eastern road stretched empty, too empty. "Could be nothing," Chun offered. "Or it could be the start." She measured her options. Evacuation would insult the local leaders. Doing nothing risked everyone. Her choice: move QRF closer. Prep for evacuation. We don't pull the plug yet, but we prepare. 20 minutes later, the crack of a sniper round split the air. Panic below. Radios flared. Contact East. QRF secure the officials. Chun, find me that shooter. All posts eyes sharp. Emma's voice cut steady, anchoring the chaos. Suppressive fire, civilians evacuated. A second shot, this one from the west, coordinated. Jackson suppress west. Miller counter-sniper in position. Everyone hold your sectors. Wilson, still limping, found himself exposed as the last civilians ran. Emma moved without hesitation, sliding beside him, rifle raised. Move when I tell you, Wilson, not before. They sprinted together, cover reached, extraction complete. By the time the officials were safe, Emma's platoon withdrew in leapfrog fashion, disciplined under fire. No casualties, no losses. Back at base, analysis confirmed it. A planned assassination attempt, prevented by her caution, her adjustments, and her refusal to freeze. That night in the recreation tent, the men gathered around a table of cards. Their laughter paused when she entered. She turned to leave, but Rivera called out, "Lieutenant, you in?" Emma hesitated, then sat. Fair warning, 3 brothers taught me poker before I could ride a bike. For an hour, she wasn't the Silver Star officer. She wasn't the woman proving herself. She was just another ranger, playing cards, trading dark jokes, letting the edge soften. Wilson made a joke about his ankle nearly getting them all killed. Emma answered flatly, "Your position was critical. You held it." He nodded, quiet pride. And something shifted. The line between legend and leader blurred. Not erased. Not yet. But blurred enough that when she left the table she knew they had begun to see her not as myth, not as symbol, but as theirs. For the first time she belonged. Why does silence sometimes feel louder than gunfire? Why did the air shift just before it all began, like the earth itself was warning them? It was supposed to be routine. A resupply run north of Sangin, 4 MRAPs, Emma's platoon providing security. The road was narrow, cutting through high ridges. One way in, one way out. Everyone knew the risks. Emma sat in the lead vehicle, headset pressed tight. Her eyes scanned the ridgeline, every shadow suspect. She'd been restless all morning. Something gnawed at her. Too quiet. Villagers absent. No children playing by the road, no livestock grazing. She keyed her radio. "Eyes up, this doesn't feel right." Chun's voice replied from the rear. Calm, solid. "Copy that." The convoy pushed forward. Dust plumed behind them. 5 minutes later it began. The explosion tore through the second MRAP. A thunderclap of earth and fire. The armored truck lifted, rolled, landed on its side in a storm of dust and shrapnel. "Contact front," someone screamed. Gunfire erupted from the ridges, a sudden storm of lead. Tracers stitched the air. RPGs arced down, trailing smoke. Emma's world narrowed. Training took over. Fear pressed her chest, but she didn't let it show. Driver halt. Gunnery suppress left ridge. Dismounts fan out. Her voice was sharp, cutting through chaos. She threw her door open, boots hitting dirt. The heat of the blast still radiated. Her ears rang, but her rifle was already shouldered. Rounds cracked past her head. Dirt spat up at her feet. "Chun, status on 2. Static, then Chun's voice, strained but clear. "Crew alive, trapped inside, taking fire." "Copy, hold position, I'm moving." Emma sprinted low, using the wrecked MRAP as partial cover. Bullets snapped inches away. One round punched the metal beside her, spraying shards across her face. She didn't flinch. Sliding behind the overturned vehicle, she found Davis already there, firing bursts uphill. His sling was gone, his arm still stiff but his rifle steady. "They're pinned inside," he shouted. Emma peered through the shattered window. Inside, Private Jackson was screaming, his leg crushed beneath twisted metal. 2 others clawed to free him, panic rising with the fire that licked from leaking fuel. "Get that hatch open," Emma barked. Davis and another soldier heaved against the door. It groaned but held. She ripped off her gloves, fingers burning against the warped steel adding her weight. Muscles screamed. Ribs ached where old scars had never healed. Still, she pulled. The hatch gave. "Get him out." They dragged Jackson clear, his leg mangled, blood pooling fast. Emma dropped to her knees, hands pressing into the wound. Her mind split half on the medical drill, half on the firefight still raging. "Tourniquet," she barked. One appeared. She cinched it high on his thigh, twisting until the bleeding slowed. Jackson bit down on his sleeve, eyes wild with pain. "Stay with me," Emma said. Her voice softened for the first time. "You're not dying here." A rocket slammed nearby, throwing dirt across them. "Reese," Chun's voice over radio urgent. "We're getting flanked from the west." Emma's head snapped up. They were being boxed in. Classic L-shaped ambush. Rivera, Wilson suppress west. Chun shift 2 fire teams hold that flank. Nobody breaks. The men moved, not questioning, not hesitating. Her orders cut through the storm like steel. But the fire kept coming. They were outnumbered, outgunned. Emma's breathing slowed. Fear was there, yes, but beneath it something steadier, think. Her eyes scanned the ridgeline. Patterns, timing. Every burst from the east came after RPG launches from the north. A rhythm, coordinated but predictable. She keyed her radio. "Chun, their command elements north. That's where it's coming from. We take that out, the rest breaks." "Understood. Who's moving?" "I am." "Negative," Chun snapped. "Too exposed." Emma ignored him. She slung her rifle, grabbed 2 grenades, and crawled toward the shallow ditch running parallel to the road. Every inch forward was pain. Dust filled her lungs. Bullets smacked earth inches away. Her ribs screamed with each breath, but she kept moving. 50 meters, 70. She could see them now, 3 fighters directing fire, one with a radio, command. She raised her rifle, slow, steady, squeezed. One dropped. The others turned, confusion breaking their rhythm. She pulled the pin, lobbed a grenade into their cover. The blast tore the position apart. Almost instantly, the enemy fire slackened. Confusion rippled through their line. "Push, suppress all ridges, take back initiative," Emma's voice roared over comms. The platoon surged, pouring fire uphill. The ambush faltered. Within minutes the enemy began to withdraw, dragging their wounded. Silence followed, sharp and sudden. The battlefield stank of burned fuel and blood. Dust still hung in the air like smoke. Emma staggered back toward the wrecked MRAP. Her arms shook. Her throat was raw from shouting. But her men were alive. Jackson clung to consciousness, his tourniquet holding. Chun appeared, face smeared with dirt. He studied her, something unspoken in his eyes. Respect, relief. "You disobeyed my order," he said flatly. Emma met his gaze. "I made a call." A pause, then quietly, "It was the right one." Later, as medevac helicopters thundered in, Wilson sat beside her, helmet off, hair matted with sweat. "Ma'am," he said, "when that first blast hit, I thought we were done." Emma didn't answer. "But then I saw you, running straight into it." He swallowed. "That's when I knew we were." Her chest tightened. She wanted to say she wasn't fearless, that every step had cost her, that doubt clawed at her even now, but she stayed silent. Because leadership wasn't about erasing fear. It was about carrying it so others didn't have to. That night after debrief, she sat alone by the flight line. The stars over Afghanistan were sharp, endless. The desert night was cold, wrapping around her. Her hands shook for the first time all day. She clenched them into fists. In the silence, a truth returned to her. Hayes had mocked her scars, called them weakness. But it was those very scars that had carried her through today, the memory of surviving fire, of carrying men through hell. The body doesn't forget. Neither does the soul. She whispered it aloud, barely audible against the wind. Scars aren't weakness, they're proof. And for the first time, she believed it. Why does silence feel heavier after battle than the battle itself? Why did the quiet of the field hospital choke harder than the sound of gunfire? Emma sat by Private Jackson's bed at Bagram's medical wing. Machines hummed softly. His leg was gone now, amputated above the knee. The medics had fought, but the damage was too much. He stirred, waking, groggy from morphine. His eyes found hers. "You promised I wouldn't die out there," he whispered. His voice was weak but steady. Emma leaned forward, resting her hand gently on his. "And you didn't. You're here. You'll see home again." He nodded slowly, tears catching in the corners of his eyes. But not the same. Emma's throat tightened. She wanted to tell him he was still whole, still valuable, that scars didn't erase worth, but words felt inadequate. Instead, she stayed, silent, present. Sometimes presence was the only truth that mattered. When she returned to her platoon that evening, they were scattered around the tent, cleaning rifles, writing letters, trying to stitch normalcy back together. Conversations hushed when she entered. For weeks, she had felt their eyes judge, measure, test. Tonight, it was different. Rivera broke the silence. "Ma'am, about today, none of us would have made it without you." Emma shook her head. "We made it because you held your positions, because no one broke. That's what saved us." Wilson spoke next, voice soft but certain. "You carried us, ma'am, same way you carried Rodriguez." Her chest constricted. They knew. Somehow the story had followed her even here. She didn't deny it, didn't deflect. She only said, "We carry each other, that's the job." Chun caught her eye across the tent. He gave a slight nod. Approval, yes, but something deeper, acknowledgement. They had crossed the line. She wasn't an outsider anymore. But beyond the base, beyond Afghanistan, the story was taking on a life of its own. News outlets back home picked up fragments. Female officer leads platoon through ambush. Silver Star lieutenant saves lives under fire. Journalists wanted interviews. Politicians wanted photo ops. The Pentagon wanted her name in speeches. Emma hated it. She had no interest in headlines. But the machine didn't stop. Requests poured in. Command relayed them, subtle pressure threaded through polite language. "You're becoming an example," Richards told her during a secure call. "People need stories like yours." Emma's jaw clenched. "Sir, with respect, I'm here to fight, not to be a symbol." Richards' sigh crackled through the line. "Sometimes, Lieutenant, you don't get to choose." The pressure seeped into her platoon, too. Soldiers ribbed her gently, joking about the legend she was becoming. Others worried, would the attention put a target on them? Would command start using them as a showcase instead of a fighting unit? Emma felt it too. Every mission carried weight now. Not just tactical success, but how it might look on paper, in headlines, in history. The next op came fast. Intelligence suggested a weapons cache hidden in a walled compound on the outskirts of Lashkar. They were tasked with raiding it, destroying supplies and withdrawing. Night, cool air. The hum of helicopters carrying them low over the desert. Emma's stomach churned as they fast-roped down, boots sinking into the dust. "Perimeter secure," Chun reported. Emma signaled forward. They breached. Flashbangs burst, doors splintered, soldiers moved with precision. Inside, stacks of weapons lined the walls, crates of RPGs, belts of ammunition, explosives. The jackpot. But it wasn't empty. Fighters opened fire from a hidden room. Chaos erupted in the confined space. Emma dove behind a crate, bullets shattering wood. She returned fire, sharp, controlled. Chun's men flanked, clearing the threat. Within minutes, the compound was theirs. "Charges set," Rivera called. They exfiltrated under cover of darkness. The explosions behind them lit the desert sky. Back at base, the report spread quickly. Successful raid, no casualties, significant blow to enemy supply. Command was thrilled. The press somehow caught wind within hours. Emma's name threaded headlines again. But victory came with shadows. One night, Mitchell, still on intel duty at headquarters, found her in the mess hall. Emma, you need to know something, she said, sitting across from her. Hayes isn't done. He's been talking to people back stateside, feeding them doubts, saying your success is exaggerated, that the ambush was staged to cover your mistakes. Emma froze, fork halfway to her mouth. He's still trying to bury me. Mitchell nodded. He's painting you as a PR stunt, and some people want to believe him, because it's easier than admitting they were wrong about you. Anger simmered under Emma's skin, but deeper than that, exhaustion. How many battles had to be fought off the battlefield? She pushed her tray aside. I don't care what Hayes says, my men know the truth, that's enough. But in the quiet of her bunk that night, she wondered, was it enough? Could the loyalty of 24 soldiers outweigh the machinery of doubt and politics? A week later, she got her answer in a way she didn't expect. Command ordered them to escort a supply convoy through contested territory. High risk, minimal glamour, exactly the kind of mission that rarely made headlines. The route wound through valleys ripe for ambush. Emma rode point again, eyes scanning every ridge. The silence of villagers, the absence of daily life, it prickled at her. Then it came, gunfire from both sides, rockets streaking, another ambush. But this time something was different. The men didn't freeze. They didn't look for her before moving. They reacted instantly, fluidly, trusting her commands without hesitation. Contact left, suppress. Dismount, flank right. Emma coordinated, calm amid the storm, but she wasn't dragging them forward anymore. They moved with her as one. The firefight lasted 20 minutes, felt like hours. When the smoke cleared, the convoy rolled forward, battered but intact, not one casualty. Back at base, Rivera summed it up quietly. Ma'am, today, nobody followed you because of a medal or a myth. They followed you because you're our lieutenant. That's all that matters. The words hit harder than any commendation. That night, Emma sat outside the tent watching the Afghan stars. Her body ached. Her scars still pulled tight in the cool air. Hayes's voice echoed in memory. Cowardice. Weakness. She touched her shoulder, the jagged scar that had nearly ended her. She thought of Jackson, alive but changed. Of Davis, who refused to let her bury the truth. Of Wilson, limping but loyal. Of Chun, steady as stone. Maybe Richards was right. Maybe she didn't get to choose what her story became. But she could choose how to live it. And quietly, fiercely, she swore to herself. She would not let Hayes write the ending. Why do the worst wounds sometimes come from your own side? Why did Emma feel colder facing a polished conference table than she had in the valley under fire? They summoned her to Kandahar headquarters. No notice, no reason given, just orders. When she entered the room, the faces told her everything. Colonel Richards, 2 unfamiliar officers in starched uniforms, and Major Hayes, smug in his chair, a thin smile slicing across his face. Emma stood at attention, spine straight, eyes forward. Lieutenant Reese, one of the unfamiliar officers, began. We've reviewed your record, including recent reports and media coverage. There are discrepancies and concerns. Concerns, sir? Hayes leaned forward, voice oily. Questions about the authenticity of your accounts, about whether your actions are being inflated to serve a narrative. Emma's pulse hammered, but her face didn't break. Sir, my reports are accurate. My platoon can attest to that. Soldiers protect their own, Hayes cut in. Especially when coached, especially when pressured. Emma clenched her fists. With respect, Major, I don't need to coach men who lived through what I did. The room tensed. Richard's jaw tightened, but he stayed silent. The second officer slid a folder across the table. Lieutenant, your physical injuries are extensive. Burn scars, rib fractures, lacerations. Some question whether you were physically capable of carrying out the feats described. Can you explain that? Emma exhaled slowly. Every scar screamed in silence. I don't need to explain. I survived. My men survived. That's the explanation. Hayes pounced. Emotion, not evidence. Exactly what I warned about from the beginning. She bends facts to fit a story. The word story cut sharper than shrapnel. Richards finally spoke. Enough. Reese, you're not under formal investigation yet, but this conversation is a warning. Command is watching. Don't give them reasons to doubt. Dismissed. Outside, Emma's legs felt like sand. The desert sun blinded her, but it wasn't heat that burned. It was rage, and something colder, betrayal. That night she found Chun sitting by the fire pit, sipping burned coffee. He looked at her, reading her without a word. "They're trying to break me," she said flatly. "They won't," Chun replied. "Not if you keep leading. Out there," he jerked his chin toward the mountains, "that's where truth's written, not in conference rooms." Emma stared at the flames. But what if the system doesn't care about truth? Chun shrugged. "Then we fight for the men beside us. That's the only war worth winning." The next mission came faster than anyone expected. Intel flagged a high-value Taliban commander moving through a remote village, the kind of figure whose capture could cripple local insurgency. The order: seize him alive. Emma's platoon would lead. It was a trap from the start. They inserted under cover of night. Dust masked the moonlight, shadows dancing on the walls of mud-brick homes. Villagers cowered, eyes downcast. Too quiet. Emma's instincts screamed. She signaled halt, raising a fist. But before she could redirect, the world exploded. Gunfire erupted from rooftops. RPGs streaked across the narrow alleys. The village was a kill box. "Contact front, contact rear," Chun's voice roared. Emma shouted orders, pulling her men into defensive positions. Bullets shredded walls, dust choking lungs. Rivera went down with a shot to the shoulder. Miller dragged him behind cover. Emma's radio crackled. "They're on rooftops, ma'am, 50 meters. Suppress and maneuver." Her voice cut steel through chaos. She moved forward, ducking low, scanning. Her eyes caught it, a signal mirror flashing from a rooftop. Not Taliban, too precise, too practiced. Coalition tech. Her gut dropped. This wasn't just an ambush, it was betrayal. Haze. She didn't have proof, but she felt it in her bones. This wasn't Taliban intelligence. This was fed to them, walked into, used. Her men didn't know, and she couldn't tell them, not now. "Chun, we need that rooftop cleared, now." He didn't hesitate. 2 fire teams surged, grenades and gunfire clearing the nests. The pressure eased just enough for them to push through the alley, dragging the wounded. They fought block by block. Dust, smoke, screams. At one point, Wilson froze under fire, pinned by a machine gun. Emma sprinted through, shoving him down, firing upward until Chun's grenade silenced the nest. Hours blurred into survival. Finally, air support roared overhead, A-10s shredding remaining resistance. The battlefield fell quiet. The village was rubble. Bodies, Taliban and civilian, littered the streets. Her men were alive but battered, 3 wounded, none killed, a miracle. But Emma couldn't shake the truth. Someone had sent them into that trap, someone in her own uniform. Back at base, the debrief was sterile. Casualty counts, weapons recovered, tactical success. Command called it a victory. Emma called it something else, betrayal wrapped in paperwork. That night Mitchell found her again, her face pale, her voice sharp. "Emma, I have proof." She slid a flash drive across the table. "Intercepted comms. Hayes leaked your unit's route. He set you up, thought you break, thought you fail." Emma's breath froze. Mitchell's voice dropped lower. "If you report this, you'll tear the battalion apart. Politics will bury it. Hayes will bury you with it." Emma closed her fist around the flash drive. Heat surged under her skin. She had survived ambushes, fire, betrayal, and silence. But this was different. For the first time, she wasn't sure if she could carry it alone. What do you do when the enemy isn't only outside the wire? What do you do when the real threat wears the same uniform as you? Emma sat alone in her quarters, the flash drive heavy in her hand. Mitchell's words echoed. Hayes leaked your route. He set you up. Her lamp cast thin light across the table. Shadows clung to the corners. She turned the drive over in her fingers as though the plastic could burn. Betrayal weighed more than body armor. She imagined walking into Richard's office, slamming the evidence down, watching Hayes's smirk collapse. Justice. But then what? A trial, investigations. Her platoon dragged into testimony, missions delayed, rumors spreading like poison, and Hayes, powerful, connected, fighting with every ounce of venom he had. If she took him down, he'd take everything with him. The door creaked. Chun stepped in quietly, eyes steady. He sat across from her, no invitation needed. He didn't look at the drive directly, but his eyes flicked to her clenched fist. Whatever that is, he said, it's eating you alive. Emma swallowed. It's Hayes. Chun didn't blink. What did he do? He fed intel, our last op. The ambush, it was Taliban alone. He set us up. Her voice cracked, low but fierce. He wanted me to fail, maybe worse. Chun's jaw tightened, but his voice stayed calm. You can prove it. She nodded. He leaned back, exhaled slow. Then you've got a choice. Report it and maybe justice comes, or keep it quiet and maybe we survive the fallout. Emma's chest ached. What would you do? Chun's eyes held hers. I'd ask myself one question. Who am I protecting? Because justice for one man doesn't matter if it destroys 24 others. He stood, leaving her with the silence. Hours later, Richard summoned her. Briefing room. Large map pinned to the wall. Intelligence officers clustered, voices sharp, clipped. Lieutenant Reese. Glad you're here, Richard said. He looked older, wearier than she'd seen before. This is it. The high-value target we've chased for months, codename Black Falcon. Regional commander tied to multiple IED networks. Location confirmed. Deep Valley stronghold. Remote. Minimal air support possible. Emma scanned the map. Steep ridges, one road in, minefields probable, enemy entrenched. Who's leading the ground assault? She asked. You are, Richard said. Your platoon will spearhead, capture or kill. Emma kept her face neutral, but inside something twisted. They were exhausted. Jackson was gone, Rivera still healing, and now this suicidal odds. She left the room with the map burned into her mind. Her men waited outside. Wilson fiddled with his helmet strap. Davis adjusted his sling. Rivera leaned on one arm, still pale. Orders? Chun asked. She hesitated, then spoke. We're going hunting. The platoon nodded grimly. They didn't need details. They trusted her. That trust was heavier than any weapon. That night Emma lay awake. The flash drive still on her table, Hayes's face in her mind, the valley ahead. Her men's lives balanced on both. In the early hours she made her choice. She slipped the drive into her chest pocket, not for command, not for headlines, but to carry, quiet, until the mission was done. They flew out before dawn. Helicopters beat the sky, rotors shaking the earth. The valley loomed, jagged cliffs swallowing the horizon. 30 seconds, the crew chief shouted. Emma looked at her men. Faces hard, eyes sharp, some young, some weathered, all hers. Listen up, she said over the roar. This isn't about medals, this isn't about headlines, this is about us. We move together, we fight together, we come back together. Nobody gets left behind, not today, not ever. The ramp dropped, dust exploded upward. They ran into fire. The first contact came within minutes. Snipers from the ridges, mortars pounding the valley floor. Her platoon scattered to cover, rifles cracking, shouts ripping through comms. Emma sprinted forward, scanning, calling orders. Wilson, flank left. Rivera, cover fire on the ridge. Davis, keep that line open. Bullets screamed past, striking dirt, ricocheting off stone. She dove behind a boulder, lungs burning. The stronghold loomed ahead, mud brick walls, sandbag towers, smoke rising from within. Black Falcon's nest. Chun, we need breach charges on that gate. On it, Chun's voice growled. They surged as one, fire teams bounding, covering, moving, sweat-soaked uniforms, dust-caked mouths. Mortars rained again. One struck near Miller, he vanished in a spray of dirt. Emma's heart clenched. She crawled through smoke, found him groaning, legs shredded. "Medic," she screamed, her hands pressed against torn flesh. Blood slicked her gloves. Miller's eyes locked on hers, terrified, human, young. "You'll see home again," she whispered, the same words she gave Jackson. "Stay with me." The medic dragged him back. Emma rose, fury flooding. "Push forward, suppress that tower." Her rifle spat fire, rounds finding targets. Chun's charges blew the gate. They stormed inside. The compound was chaos, fighters pouring from tunnels, rifles blazing. Close quarters battle, shouts, grenades, dust thick enough to choke. Emma's world shrank to seconds, decisions measured in heartbeats. Move left, fire, reload, duck. Her scars screamed, her ribs burned, but she didn't stop. Through it all, one thought anchored her: they trust me, don't fail them. Finally, they reached the central building. Inside, huddled behind sandbags, was their target, Black Falcon, rifle shaking in his hands, eyes wide with rage and fear. "Hands up," Emma shouted, rifle trained. For a moment the world stilled, then he dropped his weapon. Capture alive, mission accomplished. But the cost: 3 wounded, Miller critical, all of them exhausted, scarred deeper. As helicopters lifted them out, Emma sat against the hull, helmet off, sweat streaking dirt across her face. Her men slumped around her, silent, eyes hollow but alive. She touched her chest pocket, the flash drive still there, proof of betrayal. And she knew the war wasn't just in valleys like this. It was in rooms where men like Hayes thrived. She closed her eyes, whispering to herself, too quiet for anyone else to hear. Scars aren't weakness, they're the truth. Why does truth take so long to surface? Why do scars outlast words, yet speak louder than them all? 2 weeks after the Black Falcon raid, Emma stood again inside headquarters. The air was thick with air conditioning and politics, a world away from the dust and blood of Helmand. Her platoon had returned battered but alive. Miller was at Bagram fighting to keep his leg. Rivera was stitched up. Wilson walked with a limp but refused to sit out. They called it a victory. Command paraded it as proof of progress. But Emma carried the real weight, the flash drive still pressed against her heart, hidden in her chest pocket. Proof of Hayes's betrayal. Proof that men in her own uniform had tried to bury her. And now Hayes stood across from her, smirk carved deep, as though nothing could touch him. "Lieutenant Reese," he said, his voice smooth, mocking. "Congratulations on Black Falcon, quite the show you put on." Emma held his gaze, calm, controlled. "It wasn't a show, Major, it was survival." Hayes's smile thinned. "Careful, Lieutenant, success can go to the head. People are already whispering about you. Heroics, scars, medals, but the truth, you're a liability, you attract attention we don't need." Emma's jaw tightened. "What you mean is I attract attention you can't control." The room chilled. For the first time, Hayes's eyes flickered, just for a second. "Watch yourself," he said quietly. Emma reached into her pocket. She felt the small plastic edge of the flash drive rough against her fingertips. She could slam it on the table right now, expose him, burn everything down. But instead she stepped closer, her voice low, steady, meant only for him. "I know what you did, Hayes, the ambush, the root leak. You wanted me broken. You wanted my men dead just to prove your point. I have proof, but I don't need it." He blinked, thrown. "What?" Emma leaned in. "Because the truth already outlived you. My men talk. They tell the story. Every scar on my body tells the story. You can smear me, twist reports, spread whispers, but you'll never erase what we lived. And one day, when someone asks what kind of officer you were, do you know what they'll remember?" Hayes's smirk faltered. They'll remember you tried to bury a soldier who carried her men through fire, and you lost. The silence after was heavier than gunfire. Hayes's lips parted, but no words came. Emma didn't wait for him. She turned, walked out, not triumphant, not victorious, just steady. Outside, Chun waited by the Humvee. He looked at her face, at the quiet steel in her eyes. It's done. Emma nodded once. It's done. They drove back to base. Dust swirled in the Afghan wind, painting the horizon red-gold. That evening she gathered her platoon. No ceremony, no speeches, just them in a circle around a fire they had built from scraps of wood, faces scarred, tired, alive. She looked at each of them. Wilson limping but grinning, Rivera his shoulder bound but defiant, Davis steady as stone, Chun silent, unreadable but always there. "You've heard the stories," Emma began. "About me, about us. Some true, some not. But here's the only one that matters. We survived because we carried each other. That's all, not medals, not myths, just us." For a moment no one spoke. Then Davis lifted his glass canteen, voice rough. "To Lieutenant Reese. To the one who carried us when we couldn't carry ourselves." The men echoed, their canteens clinking. Emma swallowed hard, the firelight flickering against her scars. Later, when the fire died low and most of the men drifted to sleep, Chun spoke quietly beside her. "You had him, didn't you, Hayes?" Emma nodded. "Proof, yes, but it wasn't worth it, not at the cost of tearing this apart." Chun studied her face. "So you let it go?" Emma shook her head. "Not let go, just carried differently." She touched her shoulder where the shrapnel scar still burned on cold nights. Scars tell the truth, they don't need permission. For a long time, they sat in silence, watching the stars carve across the Afghan sky. Weeks later, Emma flew home. Medals pinned, commendations read, cameras flashed at the airfield, politicians shook her hand, headlines called her a hero. She smiled politely, answered questions with precision, stood tall when they asked about sacrifice. But inside she remembered something else. Jackson's tears, Miller's groans, Wilson's limp, Rivera's blood. The real story wasn't in speeches, it was in scars. At night, alone in her room, she undid her blouse, stared at the map of wounds across her body. Burned skin, jagged lines, bruises faded but never gone. Hayes's words echoed still, cowardice, weakness. But now they carried no weight. Because her scars didn't whisper shame. They thundered proof. Proof that she had carried men through hell, stood in fire, faced betrayal, and still rose. She traced one scar with her fingertip, the long one across her shoulder. She remembered Davis's testimony, Chun's loyalty, Mitchell's warning, her mother's tears. The scars weren't weakness. They were the horrific truth Hayes had mocked, denied, tried to bury. The truth he could never kill. And when history looked back, it wouldn't remember Hayes's smirk. It would remember the quiet dignity of a soldier who refused to break. Because sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.